Chapter 16, The State Dinner. The dinner hour drew near, yet strangely enough, the thought brought but slight discomfort to Tom and hardly any terror. The morning's experiences had wonderfully built up his confidence. The poor little ash cat was already more wonted to this strange garret after 4 days' habit than a mature person could have been in a full month. A child's facility in accommodating itself to circumstances was never more strikingly illustrated. Let us privileged ones hurry to the great banqueting room and have a glance at matters there whilst Tom is being made ready for the imposing occasion. It is a spacious apartment with gilded pillars and pilasters and pictured walls and ceilings. At the door stand tall guards as rigid as statues, dressed in rich, picturesque costumes and bearing halberds. In a high gallery which runs all around the place is a band of musicians and a packed company of citizens of both sexes in brilliant attire. In the center of the room, upon a raised platform, is Tom's table. Now let the ancient chronicler speak. A gentleman enters the room bearing a rod, and along with him another bearing a tablecloth, which, after they have both kneeled 3 times with the utmost veneration, he spreads upon the table, and after kneeling again they both retire. Then come 2 others, one with the rod again, the other with a salt cellar, a plate, and bread. And when they have kneeled as the others had done, and placed what was brought upon the table, they too retire with the same ceremonies performed by the first. At last come 2 nobles, richly clothed, one bearing a tasting knife, who, after prostrating themselves 3 times in the most graceful manner, approach and rub the table with salt and bread, with as much awe as if the king had been present. So in the solemn preliminaries. Now, far down the echoing corridors, we hear a bugle blast, and the indistinct cry, "Place for the king! Way for the king's most excellent majesty!" These sounds are momentarily repeated. They grow nearer and nearer, and presently, almost in our faces, the martial note peals, and the cry rings out, "Way for the king!" At this instant the shining pageant appears and files in at the door with a measured march. Let the chronicler speak again. "First come, gentlemen, barons, earls, knights of the garter, all richly dressed and bareheaded. Next comes the chancellor, between 2, one of which carries the royal scepter, the other the sword of state and a red scabbard, studded with golden fleur-de-lis, the point upwards. Next comes the king himself, whom, upon his appearing, 12 trumpets and many drums salute with a great burst of welcome, whilst all in the galleries rise in their places, crying, 'God save the King!' After him come nobles attached to his person, and on his right and left march his guard of honor, his 50 gentlemen pensioners with gilt battle axes." This was all fine and pleasant. Tom's pulse beat high, and a glad light was in his eye. He bore himself right gracefully, and all the more so because he was not thinking of how he was doing it, his mind being charmed and occupied with the blithe sights and sounds about him. And besides, nobody can be very ungraceful in nicely fitting, beautiful clothes after he has grown a little used to them, especially if he is for the moment unconscious of them. Tom remembered his instructions, and acknowledged his greeting with a slight inclination of his plumed head and a courteous I thank ye, my good people. He seated himself at table without removing his cap, and did it without the least embarrassment, for to eat with one's cap on was the one solitary royal custom upon which the kings and the canties met upon common ground, neither party having any advantage over the other in the matter of old familiarity with it. The pageant broke up and grouped itself picturesquely, and remained bareheaded. Now, to the sound of gay music, the yeomen of the guard entered, the tallest and mightiest men in England, they being carefully selected in this regard. But we will let the chronicler tell about it. The yeomen of the guard entered, bareheaded, clothed in scarlet, with golden roses upon their backs, and these went and came, bringing in each turn a course of dishes, served in plate. These dishes were received by a gentleman in the same order they were brought, and placed upon the table, while the taster gave to each guard a mouthful to eat of the particular dish he had brought, for fear of any poison. Tom made a good dinner, notwithstanding he was conscious that hundreds of eyes followed each morsel to his mouth and watched him eat it with an interest which could not have been more intense if it had been a deadly explosive that was expected to blow him up and scatter him all about the place. He was careful not to hurry, and equally careful not to do anything whatever for himself, but wait till the proper official knelt down and did it for him. He got through without a mistake, flawless and precious triumph. When the meal was over at last, and he marched away in the midst of a bright pageant, with the happy noises in his ears of blaring bugles, rolling drums, and thundering acclamations, he felt that if he had seen the worst of dining in public, it was an ordeal which he would be glad to endure several times a day, if by that means he could but buy himself free from some of the more formidable requirements of his royal office.